everyone. Welcome to another great interview for the 2023 Business Connection Virtual Summit. I am Bill Marshall and I am joined by Beth, and we are going to be talking all about the power of having connections and the relationships that you can build and what that truly means for our business. Because I don't think everyone fully understands the power of relationships when they come to business. So, without further ado, Beth, please tell us who you are, what you do, and a brief little introduction into what we'll be talking about today.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. Thank you for that. So I'm Beth Cohen. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Beth M. Cohen Consulting. This is a firm that specializes in connecting real estate professionals with who they need in the industry to ultimately close new deals. So I built this concept really through my experience in business development, learning the importance of building a strong network and having those authentic connections and enduring those and having enduring relationships, which is really the foundation of what created this business model. And we'll get more into that about, just as Bill mentioned, with connections and relationships and how that really leads to success in business.
Absolutely. So I think that the first thing I want to kind of talk about to really fully understand what we're discussing here is, when it comes to these relationships and what you do to help build those, how are how are we building those relationships? What is, you know, what are the main ways that you're using this network and the way that you're, putting it together?
Sure. Well, my just building the network to start is something that I have been doing for, I can remember in freshman and, college. I still am in touch with my professors. So I've always known the importance of having that established network. It's loyalty. It brings these authentic connections. But when we get into the relationship part, as opposed to networking, which is essential for expanding your circle and connecting with new individuals. The value of a relationship in business is where you really have those substantial benefits. So we're talking about repeat business because this is long-term success. So that's repeat business, that's loyalty. They become advocates of yours. So you're having that strong word of mouth and they're speaking for you. It opens doors that wouldn't be accessible otherwise. Referrals. I've had times where I just focused on that because it creates a network of warm leads to work with. And lastly, it establishes trust and credibility because people work with who they trust. So if you get a cold call for someone that's selling the exact same thing, are you going to do business with them? Or are you going to do it with someone you have a relationship with and trust established? Yeah. So these are some of the benefits of a relationship.
Absolutely. And when
Mhm.
it comes to building those relationships, give us an example, because I know you said you specialize in the real estate world. Give us an example of, some of the connections that you're helping the real estate professionals find and how that's helping their network.
Okay, yeah. So I work with real estate professionals, as you mentioned, and this ranges from developers, title agents, general contractors, real estate attorneys, you name it. And I use them to tap into my extensive network of industry experts that I've established over the years and be able to facilitate those introductions so they can move forward to ultimately do those projects and close deals. Because every one of those professionals needs a contact to be able to close. So the thing with how I apply that to relationships is I always put the relationship before everything. Always comes first. I'm in it for the long run. I don't go after that quick win. Yes, that's important. People want and need, of course, those very quick wins. But I find it more successful to look at the long-term game. So I'm not money first mentality, I'm client first. And that's a really strong principle that I live by. So and work by. It's also it's the differentiator from like direct sales. So if you are, it's the difference between sales and like business development, which is more relationship based.
Hmm.
It's it's the same. It's would you rather be sold or do you want to buy? You want to buy, of course. So this is where that relationship piece comes in. You know, it's more substantial than just going right for the buck. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think that that is the key power, that, like you said, between the two, when it comes to business models. And I don't think one is either wrong or not, but I think it's a matter of understanding your business and which one's going to be most effective for you.
Mhm.
For trends' sake, businesses that have a product tend to do better in the cold side of things than ones who have services, because a
Right.
product is easier to get across as this is what it does, buy it, as opposed to a service where you have to build a relationship. You have to have some sort of connection with that person to want to use their service. So when it comes to you building your connections and trying to build this relationship with the people that are either your customers or the ones that you're connecting to your customers, how do you start putting together those connections? What are some methods that you're using to build these relationships?
So to make the connections alone is fairly easy. I found that I'm that pretty natural bridge builder and connector. So I work very closely to understand their um, connecting requirements, so to speak,
Hmm.
and their real estate goals. So once I have all those specifics, I'll be able to match them with their ideal contact with who they need. Right now, there's a few things as far as the relationships are concerned. It always has to be win-win situation, meaning everyone should be equally incentivized. It needs to be mutually beneficial. So when you have that win-win situation, you'll get the repeat business and trust, and people really see that you have business ethics, and they people want to work with more people like that, especially if they're incentivized just as you are. So even that's how I don't win unless you win. Nothing happens till that deal closes. That makes sense. So,
Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the key things that has developed over the last couple years, where business owners and people who are getting into business relationships are really looking for that result. What is it that I'm going to get out of it?
mm,
And it has created some environments where it's kind of like, well, sometimes you won't physically get something or financially or something out of it, except for the fact that you helped me this time and I'll help you next time.
mhm.
But it's also created an environment where I think, like what you're talking about, is where you can go into a relationship saying, like, look, you serve these people, I serve these same people, but in a different capacity. We can refer back and forth and even piggyback on each other, maybe as upsells. And now there's a result for both. Or relationships where, you can very clearly see a result. And to me, it kind of cuts to the chase a little bit, makes the relationships a little stronger sometimes. But it is something to note, so that when you're trying to build these relationships or these connections, understanding the mentality and the way that the environment has changed, I think will help you connect better with how the world's moving forward. Like, for example, if you run into someone who has a standpoint where it's like, I always print things in magazines, that's all I do, and that's it. It is an older style mentality, and it's harder sometimes to connect with someone in that space, because they aren't necessarily doing the newer ways of advertising and hitting that bigger market. So I think that's an interesting thing to point out, because it is a change that's happened in the last couple of years on how people are building their networks.
Absolutely. I think, and so, people really don't, I don't think it's common knowledge all the time to understand that if you put that relationship first and you build that and you're working and really utilizing your network, how that really can lead to success versus those more traditional tactics of maybe cold calling and doing those directs, those kind of things. So yes, I completely agree with that. Things have changed. Things are changing. They,
Absolutely.
going along with that, and it opens up new doors. Really.
Definitely. So when it comes to these relationships that you're building
Mhm.
and putting together, what are some ways that you're leveraging these? I mean, the obvious one is that you're kind of being a go-between between, bringing relationships to other people who are looking for them. But what has these relationships opened up for you?
Oh, well, that's a great question. Um, well, I also want to mention before I really get to that is just some things that I do to make the relationship stronger, to be able
Hmm.
to reap those benefits, like
Absolutely.
being your true, authentic self, not putting on the sales act, right?
Hmm.
Because once they realize you're being inauthentic, they're going to start doubting everything you said and everything you're about to say.
Yeah.
So there is that. It's about the listening intently. I do the 80-20 rule. So 80% of the time I'm listening, 20% of the time I'm speaking. And when I am speaking, it's because I now hear what your problems are, what your pain points are, and how I can solve for them. And not so much what I think you need because I'm selling it. So that, that will ultimately backfire. So by having these relationships, it has given me a richer life, even personally and professionally. Having people that are loyal, trust you, that they have that likability, and help you build that rapport. It made me excel so much, and really was the catalyst for going on my own and starting the consulting firm, because I knew I had the relationships in place to support me and to be able to drive it forward.
Absolutely. So to kind of start wrapping it into a bow a little bit, we're building these relationships. We're talking about how they can be nurtured, how they can be created, and what how they can be used. I think that, let's say we have our connections and, tell us a little bit more about how your process is working to give us a good example of, what it is that can be accomplished with this from either a business side or just growing our own individual business.
So, like an example of,
Like you're the example of how we can use relationships as a business.
Mhm. Well, I'm just thinking of examples as through the consulting, like how I brought that together to for them to find success. Are these the kind of examples that you're
Exactly. Yep.
looking for? Sure. So to get more granular, some examples of that have been successful through these connections and through these relationships would be a developer that contacted me, hit a wall by trying to develop um, for cannabis users in New Jersey. Couldn't get the key players together. And then when he did that, with all the legalities and regulations around cannabis, they weren't able to work together. So I'm able to go and find my commercial insurance provider, my lender that specializes in cannabis, my land use attorney that specializes, facilitate those introductions, get that initial meeting, and get the synergy going, and seeing how they can all work together. And now finally that roadblock is removed. They're able to, the deal has legs, and now they're moving forward. Another example, I had an investor that needed a bank tenant, and was, if the banks, it's a little volatile right now. They're barely lending, let alone expanding. So this was the time that, I'm really grateful that I have those relationships established, because I was able to make the contacts. All right, who does site selection for new branches? And they're always willing to help me to find those contacts, because it's a give and take, like you said before. So I was able to locate and establish 5 national banks interested in the property, and now they're in negotiations. So these are just some examples of how putting using the connections and utilizing these relationships to bring people together so that it can ultimately succeed in business.
Absolutely. And I think there's really put it into perspective of the things that we can start accomplishing with a network. Hurdles are lower now. We can make things move quicker. We have connections that can connect us with even people. So it's not even that we have to have that person be the specific one we need. They might be someone who just knows people. So it really
Mhm.
kind of shows exactly what we can accomplish with their network. Um, as we finish up, is there anything else that you would want to mention before we kind of finish up today?
I think we touched on a lot. I will say I do public speaking to women in sales a lot, and I built my presentation called Stop the Pitch and Start the Conversation, which kind of gives you an idea of what that's about. So that is something I'm going to even build on even further. So a lot of tips, really get granular with understanding the not only the importance of relationships, but how to leverage them, how to utilize them, how to network. What are some tips to really succeed when you're networking? So if anyone's interested in that, I can go to bethmcohen.com and a free download. So do want to mention that. Yeah.
Awesome. And is there any other way that we can get a hold of you besides going to your website?
Absolutely. You can contact me through email, bmc@bethmcohen.com. And you can call me directly at 215-756-5945.
Awesome.
And reach out with any questions or inquiries. I'm always here for you.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much for your time, and thank you everybody for watching another great interview for the 2023 Business Connection Virtual Summit. Again, I am Bill Marshall, and I was here with Beth Cohen, and we will see you all in the networking event tonight. Bye.
Thanks, Bill.